Okay, we've drawn out our unit circle. I want to go smaller. So I just want to remind you that we know some things about the cosine and sine and tangent of these things. So let's imagine that we have, it's a weak drawing. Let's imagine that we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. 30, 60, 90. And we said that the hypotenuse is length 1. So that means that our short leg is half of that length and the long leg is the short leg times √3. Okay, so now if we're talking about this 30-degree angle, this side is, of course, the hypotenuse. This side is opposite and this side is, adjacent. Trying to jump ahead a little bit. To find the sine ratio, we would do opposite over hypotenuse, 1/2 divided by 1, which is just 1/2. So the sine of this 30-degree angle is opposite over hypotenuse, 1/2. 1/2 divided by 1 is 1/2. The cosine at the 30-degree angle is going to be adjacent over hypotenuse. √3/2 divided by 1 is just plain √3/2. Because the hypotenuse is always 1, which is the case because it is a unit circle, always the radius is 1, then we can redefine these axes. Instead of saying that this is just the x-axis, it also takes the term now as our cosine axis. And the y-axis is the same as the sine axis. So if they want you to find, for instance, the cosine of 45 degrees, it's this first listing of the ordered pair. It's √2/2. If they wanted us to find the cosine of, let's do 4π3, here's 4π3, we'd swing around here and name the ordered pair. Cosine is the first thing listed, so it would be -1/2, and the sine would then be -√3/2. Finally, sometimes they might ask us for tangent. And tangent, remember, is opposite over adjacent. Opposite over adjacent. And so that ends up being the same as sine divided by cosine. 1/2 divided by √3/2. Opposite over adjacent. All those things are the same. So tangent is equal to sine divided by cosine, or the y term divided by the x term. And in some of those places, that's going to mean that tangent is 0. In some of the places, it's going to mean that tangent is undefined. Wherever cosine is 0, like at 90 degrees, it's going to be undefined right here for tangent because 1 divided by 0 is not defined in mathematics. And we're going to have zeros at these couple places. Sometimes it will be 1 at these 45-degree angle marks where where sine and cosine are the same number. When you divide something by itself, it just equals 1. So here, this is tangent is 1. Over here, √2/2 divided by -√2/2, tangent is going to be -1. Right down here, we have negative divided by negative, so tangent would just be 1. And at this one over here, we got negative divided by positive, so tangent would be -1. Right here, sine divided by cosine is going to be 0 divided by 1, which is 0. So tangent is 0 here. And the same thing's going to happen over at this part. 0 divided by -1 is also going to give us 0. We mentioned undefined before. 1 divided by 0 is undefined, so tangent is undefined at this place. And the same is going to happen down at the bottom. -1 divided by 0, tangent is also undefined down here. Okay, let's take a second to talk about tangent at these spaces. If we take 1/2 sine divided by √3/2, which is cosine, 1/2 divided by √3/2. That's the same, that whole quantity is the same as taking 1/2 times 2/√3. Okay, so if we multiply those pieces together, we get 2/2√3 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So we have 1 over the square root of 3. Now to rationalize this denominator, we're going to multiply that by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. Running out of space here. 1 times the square root of 3 is square root of 3. Square root of 3 times square root of 3 is square root of 9, which is just 3. So here we found that tangent is equal to the square root of 3 over 3. Okay, I'm going to follow this pattern for some things that are similar. Here we've got 1/2 divided by negative root 3 over 2. So in this case, tangent is going to be negative root 3 over 3. Here we have negative 1/2 divided by negative root 3 over 2. Negative divided by negative is positive, so tangent is going to be root 3 over 3. And the last one, negative 1/2 divided by root 3 over 3. Tangent will be negative root 3 over 3. Okay, let's try one more ratio, and that is taking root 3 over 2 divided by 1/2. So we'll try this one out. Root 3 over 2 divided by 1/2 is the same as taking root 3 over 2 times 2 over 1, which gets us to 2 root 3 divided by 2, which is just plain old square root of 3. So at this spot, tangent is square root of 3. At this spot, we've got one positive, one negative, so it's going to be tangent is negative square root of 3. Down here, we have negative and negative, so tangent will be positive square root of 3. And finally, this one, we have one negative and one positive, so it's going to be tangent is negative square root of 3. Make sure that you draw the negative so that it's separate. This kind of looks like it would have a negative, but make sure you write it so that it's separate. Otherwise, I'll assume that you've made an error. So this one I could have written more cleanly. Let me do that. Negative space square root of 3. That's what we're talking about for tangent up there.